Stop whining. It's already sold. Those words cut through me like a blade. My son Mike stood in my kitchen as if he owned the place, arms folded, completely unfazed by the devastation he'd just caused. I needed that cash for my Italy trip, he added matter-of-factly. I froze, my hands dripping dishwater, Frank's favorite mug shaking in my grasp. You sold your father's Rolex without asking me? Mom, seriously, let it go. It was just a watch. Just a watch. Half a year after burying my husband of 43 years, my own son had pawned the only thing of Frank's that gave me comfort. Every morning, I wound that watch the way Frank had taught me, holding on to him through that small ritual. The taste of betrayal is metallic, bitter, like sucking on pennies. That day, standing in my Chicago kitchen, staring at my 42-year-old son who seemed to think grief came with an expiration date, I tasted it fully for the first time. "Which pawn shop?" I asked, my voice tight. Mike's wife, Ashley, looked up from her phone, smirking. "Oh, good. She's finally being reasonable." Her tone oozed condescension, perfected over years. "Dorothy, clinging to keepsakes isn't healthy," she added. "Frank wouldn't want you living in the past." "Don't you dare tell me what Frank would want," I thought, but bit my tongue. Ashley had been preaching about what Frank would have wanted ever since the funeral, usually when it benefited her. "Golden State Pawn on Milwaukee Avenue," Mike said, glancing at his Apple Watch, which probably cost more than Frank's Rolex. "They gave me $800. Pretty good for something that old." $800 for a 1978 Rolex Submariner Frank had saved months of overtime to buy the year Mike was born. He wore it every day of our marriage, until the day he died, when a nurse handed it to me in a clear plastic bag alongside his wedding ring. "That watch was worth at least $3,000, I whispered. Ashley scoffed. "Not in this reality. It wasn't even working." Because I was the one winding it, keeping it alive, keeping Frank alive. But they lived in a world where everything had a price tag and nothing held a story. "I'm getting it back," I said firmly. "Good luck," Mike muttered, heading for the door. "We're flying out in the morning. Ashley's been planning this vacation forever." Ashley followed, stopping only to deliver one of her fake sympathetic smiles. "Dorothy, you really should get therapy. This obsession isn't healthy." The door slammed, and I stood in silence, alone with the bitterness in my mouth and the emptiness that had filled this house since Frank passed. But Mike and Ashley had no idea who they were dealing with. I'd spent 4 decades as a bank manager. I knew the difference between surrender and strategy, and I was done surrendering. The pawn shop was exactly what I expected: small, dim, and cluttered, with harsh fluorescent lights and display cases that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years. The man behind the counter had tattooed arms and the weary expression of someone who'd heard every sob story possible. "You here for the Rolex?" he asked, before I could even speak. My heart skipped. "How did you—" "Your son called. Said you might come. Told me you're having a tough time letting go." He shrugged, almost apologetic. "Sorry, lady. Business is business. I pay fair market value." Fair market value. As if you could put a price on 43 years of marriage, or Frank's morning ritual, or that day in the hospital when his watch was returned to me alongside his wedding band. "I'll buy it back," I said, "whatever it costs." The man, his name tag read Danny, shifted uncomfortably. "It's already sold," he said. "Guy came in this morning, paid cash. No returns in this business." My heart sank. Some stranger was walking around Chicago wearing Frank's watch, and I'd never see it again because my son needed pizza money for his Italian vacation. "But here's the thing," Danny said, lowering his voice. "We found something odd when we were cleaning it up for sale." He disappeared into a back room and returned holding a small manila envelope. There was a hidden compartment in the back. Professional work had to be done by a jeweler. This was inside. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of yellowed paper, Frank's familiar handwriting neatly scrawled across it. Dorothy's birthday, July 15th, 1955, the day I knew I'd marry her. Beneath that sweet message was a strange sequence of letters and numbers. SS4457, CH0815DS. My hands trembled as I stared at the paper. In 43 years of marriage, Frank had never breathed a word about any secret compartment. All those years, and he'd kept this hidden, right there on his wrist. "You recognize those numbers?" Danny asked. I shook my head slowly. They tugged at something in the back of my mind, like a password or account code I couldn't quite place. Frank had always been meticulous with numbers, carefully jotting down every detail, every account, every investment. "The guy who bought the watch," I said suddenly. "What did he look like?" Danny's face shifted, becoming guarded. "Why?" "Because Frank hid this for a reason," I said quietly. "And I have a feeling the man who bought it might be in for a surprise." "Ma'am, I really shouldn't," Danny muttered. "Please," I urged, leaning closer, letting him see the raw grief that still clung to me after 6 months. That watch was all I had left of him. "I'm not asking you to break the law. I just need to know if the buyer seemed aware of the compartment." Danny studied me for a long moment before finally sighing. He didn't say much, but when I told him we'd found something inside, he got real curious, asked if we'd opened it. A chill crawled down my spine. "Did he give you a name?" "Paid cash," Danny replied. "No paperwork required for cash deals. But," he hesitated, "he did specifically ask about any vintage Rolexes that had come in recently. Said he was a collector. Someone had been looking for Frank's watch. On purpose. But why? And how had they known about the secret compartment?" I thanked Danny and walked slowly back to my car, the slip of paper in my purse burning like a live coal. Frank had kept this hidden for 47 years. Hidden even from me. What else had my husband been hiding all that time? That night, I sat at Frank's desk in our bedroom, surrounded by over 4 decades of carefully organized financial documents. Bank statements, tax returns, investments, all filed with Frank's characteristic precision. The code stared back at me. SS4457 CH0815DS. I'd combed through every account we'd ever opened, every safety deposit box, every investment. Nothing matched. Frank had always been straightforward with money. A checking account, a savings account, a modest retirement fund. Nothing extravagant, nothing secret, or so I'd thought. The shrill ring of my phone broke the silence. Mike's name lit up the screen. "Mom," he said sharply, "Ashley's upset. She says you caused a scene at the pawn shop." I nearly laughed. In what world is trying to get back your father's stolen watch causing a scene? I went to buy it back, but someone else already purchased it. "See? Problem solved," Mike said dismissively. "Time to move on." His casual tone made my chest tighten with anger. This was Frank's son, the baby Frank had worked extra shifts for, the boy Frank taught to throw a baseball and change a tire. When had Mike turned so cold? "Mike," I said evenly, "there was something hidden in that watch. Your father left me a message." Dead silence on the other end. Then Mike spoke, his voice sharper. "What kind of message?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but it looks like account numbers, or a password." "Mom," his tone shifted instantly, alert and almost greedy. "What exactly did it say?" Something in his voice made me pause. For the first time since the funeral, Mike actually sounded invested in something about his father. "Just some numbers," I said vaguely. "Probably nothing important." "Maybe I should come over, help you figure it out," Mike offered, his tone suddenly soft. This time I laughed, sharp, bitter, humorless. "Yesterday you told me to stop living in the past. Today you want to help sort through Frank's things?" "I'm just trying to be supportive," he muttered, "by stealing his watch." Mike sighed heavily, irritation bleeding through his voice. Fine. Be stubborn. But don't come crying to me when you drive yourself crazy chasing ghosts. When he hung up, I stared at my phone, unsettled. Mike's sudden interest wasn't concern. It was something else. He dismissed Frank's belongings as worthless sentiment. Yet now, he sounded almost invested, unless they weren't just sentiment at all. I turned back to Frank's desk, but this time I took a different approach. Instead of matching numbers to accounts, I looked for patterns, something Frank Ever the accountant would have done. He thought in systems, in logic, in order. SS, Social Security. Frank started with 457, not 4457. CH, Chicago, our home city for all 43 years of marriage. 0815, August 15th, our wedding anniversary. DS, that one stopped me. Frank's initials were FS. Mine were DS, Dorothy Sullivan. Frank had woven my initials into the code. I opened my laptop, heart pounding, and began searching. The format looked familiar, similar to codes used by offshore investment firms or Swiss banks. 3 hours later, I found it. Secure Solutions Investment Management, based in the Cayman Islands. Their site looked sleek, polished, discreet, clearly catering to wealthy clients who valued privacy. I typed the string SS4457CH0815DS into the client number field. The page blinked. Valid account number. Now I needed a password, something only Frank would expect me to know. I tried our wedding date, our address, my actual birthday. Nothing. Then I remembered the note. Dorothy's birthday, July 15th, 1955. The day I knew I'd marry her. July 15th wasn't my real birthday. It was the day Frank and I met at a summer dance in Millennium Park. He always said he'd known that night I'd be his wife someday. I typed 071555 and held my breath. Access granted. What I saw next nearly stopped my heart. Current balance, $2,470,296.70. Frank had hidden nearly $3 million for our entire marriage. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. 43 years of clipping coupons, shopping sales, repairing Frank's old work shirts instead of replacing them, while my husband quietly funneled millions into an offshore account I'd never even heard of. Anger flared hot and fast, like a spark to dry tinder. 43 years of living paycheck to paycheck, of planning a modest retirement, of endless budgeting conversations, all while Frank kept a secret fortune. But then I clicked account history. The first deposit dated back to 1982, 3 years after Mike was born. A simple $5,000 entry labeled Initial Inheritance Investment, FS, Inheritance. Frank had never once mentioned an inheritance. I scrolled through decades of contributions, all modest at first. $500 here, $1,000 there. Frank hadn't been hoarding money from our household. He'd been carefully and methodically building this separate nest egg over time. Then, around 2008, everything changed. Deposits leapt into the tens of thousands. Notations read, Real Estate Liquidation, Chicago Properties. A chill rippled through me. Frank had been quietly buying and selling property behind my back. Significant real estate deals I'd never even heard of. How do you live with someone for 43 years and not know they're running a secret business empire? I clicked on the account messages and found a folder labeled For Dorothy, Emergency Access Only. Inside was a single video file, uploaded just 3 months before Frank passed away. My hand hovered over the trackpad, hesitating. Whatever truth Frank had recorded about this secret fortune, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. But it was midnight, and I was alone in our bedroom. My son had stolen the only physical link to this mystery, and now I'd stumbled across evidence that I was wealthier than I'd ever imagined. Ready or not, I needed answers. Frank's face appeared on screen, older and wearier than I remembered. He was in his office, probably filming during his lunch break. Dorothy, he began softly, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and something has gone wrong. His tone was calm, but his eyes were full of sorrow. I hoped you'd never need to open this account, he continued, that we'd grow old together, and one day I'd tell you over dinner. He paused, rubbing his forehead with that familiar gesture he used when deep in thought. The money isn't mine, sweetheart. It was my father's. He hid it before he died in 1981. He made me promise to protect it, to keep it secret, and to only use it if our family was ever in real danger. Frank's father had died when Mike was just 2 years old. I remembered how devastated Frank had been, remembered how the modest inheritance had helped us pay off the mortgage. But apparently, there had been much more, something Frank never revealed. My father saw what the Great Depression did to families. Frank's voice continued. He wanted to make sure his grandchildren would always have protection, no matter what happened. Frank looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, it felt like he was sitting beside me. I've been investing it carefully. Every penny is accounted for, every move legal. The account has grown because I've reinvested over the years. But this was never meant to be spending money. It was our safety net, Dorothy. A shield. The video continued, Frank explaining the structure of the account, his investment strategy, the legal protections he'd set up. But I couldn't focus. One phrase echoed in my mind. I hoped you'd never need to access this account. Frank's death had been sudden, a heart attack at work. No warning signs, no time to prepare. But what if it hadn't been random? What if Frank knew something about our family's future, about a threat I hadn't yet uncovered? The next morning, I called in sick to my part-time library job. For the first time in 6 months, I had something far more urgent than reshelving books and shushing teenagers. I needed to know what Frank meant by real danger. The account held meticulous records spanning 40 years. I focused on the most recent entries. 2 weeks before his death, Frank had deposited $25,000, labeled Property Sale Emergency Liquidation. Emergency liquidation. Frank had been cashing out assets shortly before he died. I spent the entire morning digging through property records, and what I discovered made me realize the man I'd loved for 43 years had lived a double life. Frank had been buying and selling real estate across Chicago for decades, quietly, strategically, with money I never knew existed. But one detail chilled me to the bone. Every property Frank had sold in the past year had gone to the same buyer, Sullivan Investments, LLC. Sullivan. Mike's last name, too. I grabbed my phone and called my nephew Danny, who worked in real estate. If anyone could dig up information, it was him. Aunt Dot, how are you holding up? He asked warmly. I'm fine, honey. Listen, have you heard of a company called Sullivan Investments, LLC? Danny paused for a beat. Actually, yeah. They've been making waves lately. Buying up properties in good areas. Cash offers. Quick closings. Why do you ask? Do you know who owns it? I can find out. Give me an hour. I spent that hour rifling through Frank's desk again, combing every drawer, every folder, desperate for more clues. Searching for any documentation about his real estate dealings. Hidden at the very back of Frank's filing cabinet, tucked behind decades of neatly organized tax returns, was a folder labeled Insurance Policies. But instead of life insurance documents, it was filled with property deeds, contracts, and correspondence tied to Frank's investments. At the very bottom lay a single envelope that made my hands tremble. It was a letter from a private investigator, dated 6 months before Frank's death. Mr. Sullivan, per your request, I have completed my investigation into your son, Michael Sullivan's financial activities. My findings are troubling. Your son currently owes approximately $180,000 in gambling debts to several offshore betting sites. Additionally, he has taken out multiple high-interest loans against his business using falsified information about his income and assets. More concerning are his repeated inquiries regarding your estate. He has consulted 3 attorneys about contesting wills, and he's been asking about power of attorney procedures and elder care facilities. Based on the documents I've uncovered, I believe your son is preparing to have you declared incompetent in order to gain full control of your assets. I strongly recommend immediate steps to protect your estate and ensure your wife's financial security. Respectfully, Thomas Chen, private investigator. My phone rang, jolting me from the letter. It was Danny. "Aunt Dot, you're not going to believe this," he said. "Sullivan Investments LLC? It's owned by Mike, your Mike." I closed my eyes, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. Frank hadn't been hiding wealth from me. He'd been protecting it from our son. Every carefully orchestrated sale, every cash transfer, every so-called emergency liquidation had been part of Frank's plan to keep Mike from seizing control of everything we had. Frank had discovered that his own son was preparing to betray us. But Frank's sudden death had left me in the dark. All he'd managed was to hide a single clue in his watch, hoping I'd find it. Mike hadn't pawned Frank's Rolex for travel money. He'd taken it because he was hunting for exactly what I'd uncovered: access to Frank's hidden fortune. And now that he knew I'd found something, he wouldn't stop until he got it. I was still sitting in Frank's desk chair, stunned and gripping the investigator's report, when I heard the sound of a key in my front door. Ashley. She'd had a spare key since Frank's funeral, supposedly to check in on me when Mike was busy. Now I understood her visits weren't for my well-being. They were scouting missions. "Dorothy, are you here?" Ashley's overly cheerful voice rang through the house. Mike and I stopped by before heading to the airport. I shoved the report back into the folder, minimized the Cayman account window on my laptop, and forced my voice steady. In the bedroom. Seconds later, they appeared in the doorway. Mike had a small suitcase in hand, while Ashley looked like a glossy magazine cover in her designer travel outfit. Her sunglasses alone probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. "Just wanted to say goodbye," Mike said casually, but his sharp gaze darted over Frank's desk, mentally cataloging every piece of paper in sight. "What are you working on?" he asked. "Sorting through your father's things," I said carefully. "There's so much I never knew about." Ashley stepped closer, her attention laser-focused on my laptop. "Find anything interesting?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. No, this wasn't a warm family check-in. This was a search operation. "Just old tax returns and bank statements," I said smoothly. "Your father kept meticulous records." Mike relaxed slightly, smirking. "Yeah, Dad was obsessive about paperwork. Probably kept every grocery receipt for the last 20 years. "Actually," I said, deciding to test them, "I did come across something a little unusual. Some sort of investment account I didn't know about. Nothing major, just a few thousand." The change in both of their faces was instant and impossible to hide. Mike stepped forward, trying to appear casual, but failing completely. "An investment account? What kind?" Mike asked, his voice tight. "I'm not sure yet," I replied evenly. "The paperwork's complicated. I may need to hire an accountant to help me sort it out." Ashley and Mike exchanged a quick, loaded glance. "We could help you with that," Ashley offered smoothly. "Mike's great with financial documents." I nearly snorted, remembering the private investigator's report detailing Mike's gambling debts and fraudulent loans. "That's very kind," I said, my tone calm but firm. "But I've already made an appointment with Frank's old accounting firm. They'll know how to handle everything properly." Mike's jaw tightened. "Mom, those guys charge $300 an hour. I can look at it for free." "I can afford $300 an hour, Mike." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Ashley's carefully curated mask of concern was cracking, revealing the calculating woman beneath. Mike, meanwhile, looked like a coiled spring, vibrating with frustration. "We should probably get going," Ashley said finally, her voice forced. Wouldn't want to miss our flight. But Mike stayed rooted in place. Mom, he said, his tone careful, about that message you found in Dad's watch. Maybe I should take a look at those numbers before we leave. Just to make sure it's nothing important. What numbers? Ashley snapped, her head whipping toward him. Mike shot her a warning look. Mom found some kind of code in the watch. Probably nothing, but you never know. Now Ashley was fully alert, her vacation excitement replaced by a sharp, predatory focus. What kind of code? She pressed. I stood slowly, squaring my shoulders and towering over her. The kind that's none of your business. Ashley's face flushed bright red. Excuse me? You heard me, I said coldly. My husband left me a private message, private being the key word. Mom, Mike interjected, stepping between us, his voice adopting that patronizing tone I'd grown to despise. We're family. There's no need for secrets. Secrets? I nearly laughed, the bitterness in my voice sharp. You mean like the gambling debts you've been hiding? Or the shell company you've been using to buy properties with money you don't have? Mike went pale. Ashley's mouth dropped open. I don't know what you're talking about, Mike stammered, though his voice shook. Sullivan Investments LLC, I said evenly. Ring a bell? Their faces drained of color. Your father knew Mike, I continued. He knew everything. Ashley recovered first, venom dripping from her voice. You crazy old woman, you don't know a thing. Oh, I know your husband owes $180,000 to offshore gambling sites. I know he's been plotting to have me declared incompetent. And I know this plan's been in motion for months. Mike slumped against the doorframe, suddenly looking like a marionette with its strings cut. The fight drained out of him completely. How? He whispered. Your father hired a private investigator, I said, my voice steady but filled with steel. Every lie, every debt, every scheme you concocted, it's all right here. I crossed to Frank's desk and pulled out the investigator's report, watching Mike's eyes widen as he recognized the letterhead. Frank protected me from you, even in death. And that code you're so desperate to see? It's the key to more money than you could ever imagine. Money that will never belong to you. Ashley grabbed Mike's arm urgently. We need to leave. Now. But Mike just stared at me, something like respect flickering in his eyes for the first time in years. He really knew, he murmured, more to himself than to me. He knew his son was going to rob his own mother. What does that make you, Mike? I asked softly. For a moment, Mike looked like the little boy I'd raised, confused, ashamed, lost. But Ashley's grip tightened and the moment shattered. This isn't over, Ashley hissed as they moved toward the door. Yes, it is, I called after them. It's been over since the day you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. The front door slammed, leaving me alone with Frank's secrets, and the knowledge that the real fight was only beginning. 2 days after Mike and Ashley's dramatic exit, my doorbell rang promptly at 8:00 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw a sharply dressed woman holding a leather briefcase, flanked by a man who looked like he'd been plucked straight from a law school brochure. Mrs. Sullivan, she said smoothly when I opened the door. I'm Catherine Wells from Wells, Morrison & Associates. This is my colleague, David Kim. We represent your son, Michael, in some family legal matters. Family legal matters. That was certainly one way to spin it. I opened the door but didn't step aside to invite them in. What can I do for you? Catherine offered a polished, professional smile, the kind that likely cost $300 an hour to practice. Mrs. Sullivan, she began smoothly, your son is concerned about your well-being. He's asked us to discuss a few options that could be beneficial for everyone involved, such as... David, the man with the tablet, stepped forward to finish her sentence. We understand you may have discovered certain financial accounts that your late husband kept private. While we're sure his intentions were good, managing complex investments can be overwhelming, especially while you're grieving. Overwhelming. as though I hadn't spent 40 years balancing every penny of our household finances, while Frank secretly built a real estate empire. I appreciate your concern, I said coolly, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Catherine's smile didn't falter, though her tone softened further. Of course, but consider this. Your son could help ease that burden. We've drafted some paperwork granting Michael temporary power of attorney over your finances, just until you've had time to heal. And there it was, exactly what Frank's investigator had warned me about. Temporary, I repeated flatly. And who decides when my grieving period is over? David exchanged a loaded glance with Catherine. That would be entirely at your discretion. Naturally. Naturally, I echoed, stepping back toward my door. Well, I think we're done here. Mrs. Sullivan, Catherine said, her voice sharpening like a knife. Your son is prepared to petition the court for a mental competency evaluation. He's worried about some erratic financial decisions you've been making. What erratic decisions? I asked, my voice like steel. Accessing offshore accounts. Conducting large international transfers without professional oversight. David replied smoothly. To an outside observer, it could raise questions about your judgment. The threat was crystal clear. Sign over control willingly, or they'd have me declared incompetent. You know what's interesting about threats, I said, leaning casually against the doorframe. They only work on people who don't have better lawyers than you do. Catherine's perfect smile cracked slightly. I beg your pardon? You can tell my son this plan won't work, I said, voice like ice. Frank left me more than money. He left me protection. And with that, I closed the door firmly in their faces. I didn't waste a second. I went straight to my desk, pulled out Frank's secret files, and dialed the number I'd found there. Thomas Chen, the man answered on the second ring. Mr. Chen, this is Dorothy Sullivan, Frank Sullivan's widow. Mrs. Sullivan, he said calmly. I've been expecting your call. Frank told me you might need my services one day. He did? Yes, about 6 months ago. Your husband instructed me to prepare a full legal defense package in the event anyone tried to challenge your competency or take control of his estate. Everything is ready. Frank had been 3 steps ahead, even in death. How ready? I asked. By the time I'm done presenting proof of your son's gambling debts, falsified loan applications, and elder exploitation attempts, Chen said without hesitation. He'll be lucky if he doesn't face criminal prosecution. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Mr. Chen, I think it's time to start making some calls. Thomas Chen's office was located in a sleek high-rise downtown, a place that practically radiated expensive legal expertise. Sitting across from him, I watched as he spread Frank's carefully prepared defense strategy across his mahogany desk. It was meticulous, flawless. My husband had been planning this confrontation long before he died. Your husband was thorough, Chen remarked, sliding document after document toward me. Bank statements proving Mike's gambling losses. Surveillance photos of him meeting with shady estate attorneys. And even audio recordings? I interrupted, startled. Thomas nodded. Frank had a strong feeling Mike was plotting something. He had your house wired for sound last year. Completely legal, of course, since it was his property. My heart sank as I thought about every conversation Mike and Ashley had had in my kitchen over the past 6 months. Every dismissive comment about my mental state. Every calculation about Frank's assets. Every cruel joke about putting me in a nursing home. Frank had heard everything. There's more, Thomas said gravely. Frank also uncovered that Ashley has been systematically isolating you from your family and friends. She's been telling people you're becoming senile, that you need supervision. The puzzle pieces snapped together in my mind. That's why my sister-in-law had stopped calling. That's why neighbors avoided eye contact in the grocery store. That's why my book club friends treated me like a fragile relic. Ashley had been planting seeds for months, running a whisper campaign to set the stage for Mike's legal attack. "How strong is our case?" I asked quietly. Thomas's expression hardened. "Strong enough to crush any competency challenge and likely get them both prosecuted for elder abuse and attempted fraud." He pulled out a thick folder but hesitated. "There's something else. Frank left you instructions, very specific instructions, on what to do if you ever had to access that offshore account." Thomas handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Frank's unmistakable, careful handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. Inside was a letter dated exactly 1 week before Frank's death. "My dearest Dorothy, if you're reading this, then Mike has revealed who he really is, and you've uncovered the account I've been building for 40 years. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive, but I had to keep it safe from him until the time was right. This money isn't just an inheritance, it's justice. Every penny came from investments I made using information Mike thought he was hiding from us. When he bragged about his guaranteed real estate flips, I quietly bought properties in the same areas. Every stock tip he carelessly dropped, I acted on with funds he didn't know existed. Mike's arrogance funded his own downfall. The account exists because I used his greed against him. Now it's your turn. Thomas will transfer everything immediately. By the time you read this, you'll have financial freedom Mike can never touch. But more importantly, you'll have a choice. Forgive him, help him despite his betrayal, and pray he becomes a better man. Or let him face the consequences of trying to steal from his own mother. The choice is yours, my love. It always has been. Forever yours, Frank." The letter trembled in my hands. Frank hadn't just protected me. He'd turned Mike's own schemes into a weapon. My late husband had outplayed our son at his own game. "Mrs. Sullivan," Thomas said softly, watching me closely. "Are you ready to proceed?" I thought of Mike as a bright-eyed little boy, clutching his backpack on his first day of school. Then I remembered the man who stood in my kitchen 2 days ago, calling me crazy while Ashley threatened me. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. "Mr. Chen," I said firmly, "file everything we have, with every authority that needs to see it, and do it today." The next morning, chaos erupted in my quiet Chicago neighborhood. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, pretending to read the newspaper, when 3 black SUVs rolled up in front of Mike and Ashley's house. FBI agents in windbreakers swarmed the place, hauling out boxes, computers, and filing cabinets. My phone rang immediately. "Mom," Mike's voice was panicked, desperate. "What did you do?" "I protected myself," I said evenly, watching through my window as agents emptied their house. "The way you should have protected your family instead of plotting to rob us." "You don't understand," Mike begged. "This will destroy us." "You destroyed yourselves," I said coldly. "I just made sure it was documented." Ashley's voice shrieked through the phone, dripping venom. "You vindictive old witch! We were trying to help you. By stealing my husband's watch, by planning to have me declared incompetent, by spreading lies about my mental health to isolate me from friends and family." The line on the other end of the call went eerily silent, broken only by Ashley's ragged, furious breathing. "Frank knew everything, Mike," I said coldly. "Every debt, every lie, every plan you made to rob us. He spent the last year of his life protecting me from his own son." "Dad wouldn't," Mike started, but I cut him off. "Your father hired a private investigator to document your gambling addiction and your plan to steal my inheritance. He wired our house so he could record every single conversation you had about putting me in a nursing home." The sound that came from Mike was a mix between a gasp and a sob, like a wounded animal. "The FBI is seizing your business records because Frank's evidence proves you used fraudulent information to get loans. The IRS is auditing you for hidden income, and the state attorney's office is investigating you for elder abuse. Mom, please, Mike's voice cracked. I never meant for it to go this far. When did it start, Mike? When did you decide your mother was worth more to you dead than alive? There was a long, heavy pause. When Mike finally spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. When I realized Dad had been hiding money from us, he confessed. I saw papers in his office last Christmas, references to accounts I didn't recognize. I thought if you both died, it would all come to me automatically. His blunt honesty hit harder than his lies ever had. You were wrong, I said firmly. Frank made sure I'd always be protected from you. How much? Mike asked quietly. How much did he hide? Enough that I'll never have to rely on family who sees me as a burden. I ended the call and turned my attention back to the scene unfolding outside. Through my window, I watched FBI agents lead Mike and Ashley out of their home in handcuffs, escorting them into separate black SUVs. Ashley screamed curses and threats at the agents, demanding attorneys, but Mike just looked utterly broken. My phone rang again. This time it was Mrs. Patterson from across the street. Dorothy, she said softly, guilt in her voice. I wanted to apologize. Ashley told me you were having memory problems, and I believed her. I should have come to you directly. It's all right, Helen, I said gently. Ashley can be very convincing. Is it true, what they're saying? That he was planning to steal from you? I glanced at Frank's photo on the mantel. The man who had protected me, even beyond death. It's true, I said, my voice steady. But it's over now. 3 weeks later, I sat in Thomas Chen's office, reviewing the final legal filings. Mike and Ashley were now facing multiple federal fraud charges, their business seized, their assets frozen. The case was airtight, but that morning brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Sullivan, Thomas's secretary said, poking her head in. There's someone here to see you. Says his name is Richard Torres. He says he has something that belongs to you. A well-dressed man in his 60s entered, his demeanor calm and deliberate, the kind of presence that screamed law enforcement. In his hands, he carried a familiar blue velvet box. Mrs. Sullivan, he said respectfully, placing it gently on Thomas's desk. I'm the one who purchased your husband's watch from the pawn shop. I blinked in confusion. How did you know to find me? Richard smiled faintly. Because Frank Sullivan hired me 20 years ago to protect this watch if anything ever happened to him. I don't understand. I'm a retired U.S. Marshal, Mrs. Sullivan, he explained. Your husband contracted me years ago to keep an eye on certain things. When that watch appeared at Golden State Pawn, I was notified immediately. Thomas was scribbling notes rapidly. You were surveilling Mike Sullivan? Among other things, Richard said calmly. Frank was meticulous in his preparations. He opened the velvet box, revealing Frank's Rolex. But then he flipped it over, pressed something on the back, and a second hidden compartment popped open. Inside was a tiny micro SD card. Frank recorded everything, Mrs. Sullivan, Richard said quietly. Every conversation Mike had about manipulating you. Every meeting with lawyers about declaring you incompetent. Every discussion about what to do with your estate once you were gone. The room tilted slightly as I gripped the chair for balance. Frank had been documenting everything for 18 months. Audio, video, financial records, everything needed to ensure Mike could never successfully challenge your mental competency or your right to Frank's inheritance. Richard carefully slid the tiny SD card into Thomas's computer. The screen lit up instantly, filling with folders, hundreds of them, each one packed with meticulously organized evidence, hours of audio recordings, video surveillance, bank records, legal documents, even photographs of Mike meeting with shady lawyers and underground gamblers. Your husband loved you enough, Richard said softly, to spend the last 2 years of his life building an airtight legal fortress around you, against his own son. My throat tightened. I thought back to Frank's final months, the stress in his eyes, the late work meetings he claimed to attend. All that time, I'd thought he was pulling away from me. But Frank hadn't been hiding from me. He'd been fighting for me. There's one more thing, Richard said quietly, pulling another envelope from his briefcase. Its bold lettering read, "Final Instructions, Dorothy's Protection Plan." Inside was a single document that made my heart pound. In the event that Michael Sullivan attempts to challenge Dorothy Sullivan's mental competency, the following will take effect immediately. All property owned by Sullivan Investments, LLC, will be liquidated and donated to the Chicago Children's Hospital in Michael Sullivan's name. All gambling debts, outstanding loans, legal fees, and elder abuse court costs will be legally attached to Michael Sullivan. Michael Sullivan will receive no inheritance or financial benefit from Frank Sullivan's estate or Dorothy Sullivan's assets. Frank had designed a plan where Mike would inherit only his own destruction. Your husband was brilliant, Thomas said with a note of awe. He turned Mike's greed into a legal snare. Frank knew Mike would never stop coming after this money, Richard added. So he made sure any attempt to steal from you would strip him of everything he already had. I picked up Frank's Rolex, its weight familiar and comforting in my palm. For 43 years, I'd thought I was married to a simple, cautious accountant, a man who stressed over every dollar and saved every penny. In reality, I'd been married to a master strategist who had orchestrated one of the most sophisticated protection plans I'd ever heard of. "Mrs. Sullivan," Richard said gently, handing me one final envelope. "Frank asked me to give you this if this day ever came." This envelope wasn't sealed. Inside, in Frank's steady handwriting, was a single message. "Dorothy, you were always stronger than you knew. I just made sure you'd have the tools to prove it. Love always, Frank." 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Chicago Children's Hospital, tears stinging my eyes as workers installed a polished brass plaque. The Frank Sullivan Memorial Wing, funded by Dorothy Sullivan. Frank's secret fortune hadn't just secured my safety. It had funded the hospital expansion he'd always dreamed about. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mike's betrayal had led directly to the largest charitable donation in the hospital's history. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Chen. "Mike's sentencing hearing is next week. Recommendation: 2 years federal prison. Full restitution. Ashley pled out for 18 months. Still want to attend?" I typed back a simple response. "No. I have better things to do." And I did. At 73, I was finally free, living the life Frank had spent decades protecting. I'd bought a cozy lakefront home, joined 3 book clubs, and started volunteering twice a week at the very hospital Frank's generosity had helped expand. For the first time in my life, I was making choices based solely on what I wanted, not what my family demanded. That evening, I was preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with Mike's eyes and a nervous smile. "Grandma Dorothy," she said softly. "It's Melissa, Mike's daughter. I hadn't seen her since Frank's funeral, back when she was finishing college and starting her first job. Ashley had severed every tie she could, cutting me off from my grandchildren just as she'd isolated me from everyone else." I opened the door, heart aching. "Melissa, what a surprise." "I know I should have called first," she said, wringing her hands. "I heard about Dad and Ashley, about what they did to you. I wanted to apologize." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said, my voice warm but steady. "I do, though," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "I knew something was wrong. Dad kept asking weird questions about Grandpa Frank's finances, and Ashley was always making comments about your memory. I should have said something. I studied my granddaughter's face, seeing Frank's honesty reflected there, even though she carried Mike's features. "Come in, sweetheart. Let's talk." Over dinner, Melissa opened up about her life, her new job teaching elementary school, her engagement to a young doctor, and the heavy guilt she carried over her father's crimes. "I keep thinking I should visit him in prison," she admitted softly. "But I'm so angry about what he did to you." "Anger is normal," I told her gently. "But Mike is still your father. How can you not hate him?" I thought about Frank's final letter, the choice he'd left me between forgiveness and justice. "Because hate would mean he still has power over me," I said quietly. "I choose peace instead." Melissa's eyes welled up with tears. "I missed you so much. Ashley told everyone you didn't want to see us anymore, that you were confused." "I never stopped wanting to see you," I assured her, "and I never will." Later, as she helped me clear the dishes, Melissa paused in front of Frank's photograph on the mantel. "I always wondered why Grandpa wore that watch every single day," she murmured. "He must have really loved it." I smiled, thinking about the secrets hidden in that Rolex. The compartments, the SD card, the offshore fortune, and the protection plan that saved my life. "He loved what it represented," I said softly. That night, after Melissa left with promises to visit every week, I sat on my back porch and watched the sun set over Lake Michigan. Frank's watch rested on my wrist, ticking steadily. He'd been gone for 8 months, yet he was still protecting me. The greatest love stories aren't built on fleeting passion or whirlwind romance. They're about safety, about someone loving you enough to fight battles you never even knew existed. Frank had spent 2 years preparing for a war I never saw coming, making sure his death wouldn't leave me vulnerable to his own son's greed. Some people spend a lifetime searching for that kind of love. I was blessed to wear it on my wrist for 43 years. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.